Hello and welcome to another episode of Life in Spain News. For those of you who tuned into my last video, where I mainly talked about shark sightings off the coast of Spain, you may or may not remember I briefly mentioned the wildfires that have been occurring across Spain. Now, I had hoped by the time I came to record this episode that would have been a thing of the past. But if anything now, that has now turned into quite a serious news story, and so much so, it may be some of the worst wildfires in the history of this country. So before I move on to some more light-hearted news, I thought it's only right to touch upon this story and share with you some footage and some of the things I've learned from the news or watching the news here. Right, to start with, I'll put a map up on the screen here which will show you where these particular incidents have been occurring. And the government estimates this year in Spain that 224 separate wildfire incidents have happened. Now, there is no discrimination here, and they tend to be all over the country. And they reckon this year so far, over 344,000 hectares of land have been destroyed by these wildfires. Now, to give you some sort of idea of how big a hectare is, 0.8 of a hectare would be your standard size football or soccer field. Now, we've had some very odd weather here, as I've talked about on many videos before, and a lethal combination of extreme heat and wind has led to these occurrence of these wildfires. Now, usually the firefighters are quite well equipped and prepared for these types of things, but the fires have occurred over such large areas. Their resources have been stretched, so much so that the armed forces has been called in. Now, this is where I stood last week when I looked at this story, but since then, not only have the French and Italian fire brigades been called in to help with the efforts to contain these fires, but only yesterday I was reading that Germany had sent down a squadron of firefighters to help with the aid. Now, these fires have been happening all over Spain, but at the moment it seems to be affecting mainly the northwest corner of the country, around the Galicia and Salamanca area, where some quite horrendous scenes have been shown on the news. Now, of course, the government have been trying to deal with this as best they can, but they have definitely had their resources stretched. Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, has been on at various sites to offer his support. Of course, like always, this has been politicised, criticising the efforts to help the areas under such duress. Now, Sanchez himself has pledged that there will be aid packages and all sorts of damage reports done about this. But bearing in mind what happened with the recent floods in Valencia, or the Dana as they're known here, where people are still waiting for aid and lots of work is still waiting to be done, I wouldn't hold my breath with that one. Now, one of the interesting things here is the way that the Spanish fight their fires here is by air. And there are 43 squadrons of special water planes that operate throughout the country. And basically, if anybody has seen these, which I'll try and put some footage up on the screen now, it's quite sensational. They basically look for a large stretch of water near where these fires are occurring, and basically lower the plane into it, where it scoops up large amounts of water, then to be later dumped across the affected areas. Now, I've seen this firsthand, and it's quite spectacular to see. And where I used to have my bar, we were right in front of the ocean, and quite often we would sit there, and it would make the most amazing spectacle seeing these planes swooping in and picking up the water. Even myself down here over the years, I've seen what devastation these fires can do. And I remember I used to walk with my children in a little wooded area a couple of kilometres outside where I live here. And that was actually affected by the fire. And I remember going up there afterwards and seeing it, and it was just like something out of a horror movie, horrendous. Now, this video here I'm going to show you now is footage of Salamanca, which will give you an example of how how much devastation actually occurs when these fires hit, and it is quite shocking. So all we can do is really, really hope that the firefighters can get on top of it, that people can remain safe, and that and things can get under control and back to normal as soon as possible. Now, there is a more sinister side sometimes to these wildfires, and in the past, and I'm not saying the current fires we're seeing across the country are a result of this, there has been a case of arson where people have been trying to get land recategorized from green to land that can be built on by destroying it. Now, the authorities are aware of this, and in the past people have been arrested for doing this. So let's just hope that these fires are just the results of Mother Nature fighting back, and they can be under control. Now, talking of Mother Nature, we've had a very odd year of weather, as I've mentioned on various videos on my channel. From the driest January to the wettest March to extreme heat in June and quite a mild July. But what I wasn't prepared to see is what I saw last week from the coast of Grenada, where holidaymakers were suddenly struck by a mini hurricane, which you can see from this footage here. It was quite dramatic. Now, we do get these whirlwinds that do sweep across, and this is also one of the reasons why these wildfires have been happening mainly up north. But to see this footage here, it does show you how erratic the weather can get. And of course, we don't suffer from this type of weather very often, but it is quite shocking footage. Right, to cover something slightly more light-hearted, we do have an issue down here with wild boars. Now, some of these stories have gone viral and actually made the international press. To give you an idea, wild boars has always been a bit of an issue down here in Spain, and they've turned into a bit of a mixed race where wild boars have been reproducing with wild pigs, and numbers are getting out of hand with various laws protecting the hunting of these animals. So much so that their numbers have started to grow to such a level that they've started to move away from their natural habitat of the forests and the countryside and started moving into urban areas. Now, we've had loads of instances here when they've been spotted in empty bars and things like that. But a quite famous one, which happened a couple of months ago, was they were caught on film walking into the local shopping centre in my local town of Fongarola, which is quite amazing in itself. But maybe what trumps that is what's happened this week, as maybe the same wild boar, maybe a different family, have decided that they needed to up sticks from inland, where it's getting very hot, and have a day on the beach. Now, as you can see here, they have not a care in the world, wandering along the beach, dipping their feet in the water, to much to the amusement of bathers and holidaymakers. To finish off, I'm going to quickly talk about the US Open, which has just started in New York, and Carlos Alcaraz, Spain's tennis star, who'll be hoping to win yet another Grand Slam to add to his ever-increasing collection. Now, recently he won the tournament in Cincinnati, where he beat world number one Jannik Sinner, who unfortunately had to retire ill. But it shouldn't take away from Alcaraz, who had a very successful week there, and goes into the tournament as one of the favourites. Unfortunately for poor old Carlos, he did team up with Britain's own Emma Raducanu for the mixed doubles, and went out in the first round, which isn't too bad for us Brits. They were beaten by another Brit, Jack Draper, and his partner, who moved on to the quarterfinals. So let's hope Carlos does well and Spain have another champion to cheer this year. That's all for today, and let's hope by the time I speak to you next, these wildfires are all under control in Spain and hopefully no more lives are lost. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and please leave a comment. It's much appreciated. Have yourselves a lovely evening. Goodbye.